I mean, you see a lot of crazy things on Nexus Prime, right? But this was different. The main support column of Docking Wing Gamma wasn't just creaking, it was screaming. That high-pitched metallic shriek that tells any sane species the end is strictly a matter of seconds, not minutes. The heat was licking at the blast shielding, bright enough to leave spots in your vision for an hour. And then, through that wall of shimmering distortion and falling durasteel, she came running. Sloane. She wasn't just running, she was flying, with two massive reptilian dockworkers tucked under her arms like they weighed nothing more than sacks of grain. The floor behind her just dissolved, dropped into the reactor vent, and she leaped. I held my breath. We all did. She hit the threshold, rolled, and the whole wing disintegrated behind her in a roar of metal and fire that shook the fillings in my teeth. But wait, hold on. It didn't start with the fire. Truth is, to understand why she ran into that hellscape when everyone else ran out, you have to understand what happened that morning in the market. I was sitting with Kalen, the station's lead security analyst. Kalen's seen it all, usually completely unfazed, but he was staring at this human woman, Sloane, walking through the crowd. Now, Nexus Prime is full of apex predators, species that track blood scent from 3 sectors away. Sloane had cut her arm on a sharp crate edge. It wasn't a small cut either. Bright red blood was dripping onto the sleek deck plates, but she didn't even slow down. She was checking a manifest on her datapad, completely ignoring the wound. I watched 3 Krogashi mercenaries, huge things, all scales and teeth, step out of her way. They looked terrified. I asked Kalen why. He just shook his head and whispered that it violated every primal understanding of vulnerability in the galaxy. Here was a species that doesn't respond to injury with vulnerability signals. To the Krogashi, that didn't mean she was weak. It meant she was insane or invincible. Later, Kalen confronted her about it outside her quarters. I tagged along. He asked her why she hadn't sought medical attention immediately. She just shrugged, slapped a bio patch on it, and laughed. She said humans come from a world where everything tries to kill you, so you learn to prioritize. They bled easily and called it Tuesday. Kalen looked like his processor was overheating. Oh, he couldn't compute that kind of disregard for biological integrity. Then the alarms hit. A volatility warning from Docking Wing Gamma. We felt the shock wave before we heard it. It knocked the wind right out of me. By the time Kalen and I got to the perimeter, the blast doors were buckled outward like crushed soda cans. Smoke was pouring out, thick and acrid. The security teams were holding back, waiting for heavy enviro suits because the air inside was toxic. Standard protocol. Safe. Logical. But logic doesn't seem to apply to humans. Sloane was there with another human, a technician named Elias. I saw them exchange a look. No speeches, no hesitation. Elias jammed a pry bar into the warped seal of the door, and Sloane threw her shoulder against it. I shouted that it was suicide, that the air alone would burn their lungs. Brady, Sloane looked back for a split second. She didn't look heroic. She looked annoyed. She shouted over the klaxons that the math is simple. Possible death versus certain death. Then the door gave way with a screech of tearing metal, and they vanished into the smoke. I mean, I didn't think they were coming back out the first time. I really didn't. But 30 seconds later, Elias stumbles through the smoke, coughing his lungs up, dragging an unconscious welder. Then Sloane follows, carrying 2 more. She drops them, wipes soot from her eyes, and turns back around to go in again. I swear the security chief tried to grab her arm, tried to tell her the containment field was failing, but she just shook him off like a fly. Her leg was a mess. A jagged piece of plating was sticking right out of her calf. Bleeding down into her boot, but she was moving like it was just a scratch. That's when the station AI started screaming about catastrophic structural integrity failure. Fancy talk for we're all dead. The main support beam in the bay started singing. That's the only word for it. A high, vibrating hum that rattled your bones and set the teeth on edge. Kalen looked at me, his eyes wide, his mandibles clicking in panic. He knew the physics. The bay wasn't just burning, it was about to fold in on itself. Through the flickering drone feeds, we saw them at the back of the bay, 5 workers were pinned under a collapsed ventilation shaft. Elias was pulling at it, but the thing must have weighed half a ton. The fire was roaring so loud the audio pickup was just static, but I saw Sloan shove Elias back. And this is the part the inquiry couldn't explain later. Sloan didn't use a jack. She didn't use a lift. She just jammed her shoulder under the hot metal and heaved. I could hear her scream over the comms, a raw, guttural sound that didn't sound human at all. But the metal moved, just enough. Elias yanked the survivors free, dragging them toward the exit. The main column snapped with a sound like a planetary cracker going off. "Run!" Elias yelled. And they did. Sloan was limping. Bad, but she was still carrying the smallest of the survivors. The floor behind them was literally falling away into the void. They crossed the threshold, hit the deck hard, and the emergency blast doors slammed shut milliseconds before the decompression could suck us all out into the black. Silence. Absolute ringing silence. Then the alarms kicked back in. And when a fast forward 6 hours. I'm in the med bay with Kalen. We expected a funeral. Or at least a coma. Instead, Sloan is sitting up, eating some green nutrient paste that smells like engine coolant. The doctors were baffled. They said her metabolism was burning through sedatives like they were water. Kalen asked her, point blank, why? Why risk it all for strangers? Why ignore the biological imperative to survive? She looked at him, confused, like he asked why she breathes air. She tapped the side of her head and said it was just a calculation. You break a few bones, you save a few lives. Humans are weirdly hard to kill, she said, winking at him. The official report came out a week later. It called it evolutionary altruism, or something fancy like that. They said humans have this spite that refuses to let the universe win, on a survival mechanism that defies standard galactic logic. But walking through the market with Kalen afterwards, watching the crowd part for Sloan, even the massive Krogashi stepping aside with newfound respect, I realized something else. We used to think humans were soft because they bleed. Now we know they're the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, because they don't care if they bleed as long as they win. And honestly, that terrifies me.